As I understand it, this is a historic episode in terms of visuals, considering how naturally I look and how you guys look.
Too bad you're not wearing a sailor shirt.
I hope you don't mind me
You're
being
ignoring
a
the
bit
dress code.
casually dressed right now.
No, it's great. Actually, I think you should climb onto a stump, squat, and it'll look completely natural and authentic.
Nastya, this spring marks 5 years since our first meeting. Over these 5 years, it feels like IC3PEAK has become even more global. You've collaborated with real international stars. I'm talking about Grimes and Oliver Sykes. You've been touring even more outside Russia, from Mexico and Colombia to Australia. I really want to talk with you about your new life. And that's why we've been spending these couple of days together, discussing how things are going for you. I'll start with a personal story. June 2022, the 4th or 5th month of the war, the Primavera Sound Festival in Barcelona. The most important festival in Barcelona and one of the most significant in Europe. You're performing at the same time as the main headliner that year, The Strokes, a band my wife loves, and the reason we went there in the first place. And we decided to drop by IC3PEAK before heading to see The Strokes. I remember the incredible emotions I felt at that moment. First, let me remind you, that was during the cancellation of everything Russian. I was surprised that you were even on the lineup. Second, I had only seen in videos how popular you were with people who don't speak Russian. But there, I witnessed it live. The crowd around me was speaking Spanish, French, and English, and they knew the lyrics. They were literally repeating, as you said in the previous interview, Zagrusny Sukai, and not just that song. And third, that whole performance, it was like a showcase of Russian culture in its electronic, modern, and artistic form. Basically exactly what you've always been doing in your music. I experienced an absolutely overwhelming wave of emotions. I was insanely grateful to you for that set. We ended up missing The Strokes. Didn't lose anything though, because their frontman wasn't in the best shape on stage.
It happens.
So once again, a huge thank you for that performance. It was amazing.
Thank you.
For me, honestly, that festival stands out because in the crowd there was Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead listening to our set. That was a huge deal for me since I'm a really big fan of Radiohead.
You saw him yourself or you found out later?
No, the guys from our crew told us.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm glad that you felt a sense of healthy patriotism while being there.
It's been 4.5 years. You're no longer in Russia, but here we are again, meeting in what feels almost like a wooden cabin.
You'll rarely find a more soundproofed space than a wooden cabin because wood is great at absorbing sound. There's very little echo here. I can easily record guitars, I can easily record vocals, and I don't really need to do anything extra for that. Especially in the storage room where we are now, it's even more soundproofed. So honestly, it works just like a studio.
That's why it's always a cabin.
Well, when I travel around the world, I try to find something similar. Not for sentimental reasons, it's strictly technical standpoint.
And this is a good illustration of how artists who've left the country work. 4.5 years ago, you had a huge private studio you'd been actively using, and now it's just this little storage space.
But now I have...
A downgrade.
I'd actually say the opposite, because now, wherever I go in the world, I manage to set up a workspace like this. I just don't stay in one place.
Nastya mentioned that when you travel as a band, you often stay together, and the main struggle is always over who gets the storage room.
Well, yeah, there is no real struggle, but there is a hierarchy. And now we usually give the storage room to Nastya because she requires it more to record vocals.
Nastya, there are plenty of videos on YouTube, there are a lot of them, titled Nastya Smiles.
I'm smiling now.
Can you explain the origin of these videos?
It's just a compilation of me smiling. Actually, Nick is in some of them too.
But why do people make these edits? Because you have this reputation of someone who doesn't smile, or...
Well, as a project, we have a pretty reserved image overall. We don't really demonstrate emotions much, but I can't. Because you're sitting there smirking so slyly. It's impossible not to laugh.
All right.
Well, I mean, sure, I smile in every interview. I can't hold back a smile because I can't control my emotions that precisely, and honestly, I don't want to. So some enthusiasts just made a compilation of me smiling because people like how I smile.
You released a collab with Oliver Sykes
Yeah, that's right.
from Bring Me the Horizon.
Drinking blood like cherry coke, I wish I had a soul.
We just got in touch and decided to make a track.
That's right.
Who messaged first?
Good question. If only I could
Do you
remember.
remember?
I remember that in 2000s...
I think we were just chatting with him and one thing led to another.
What were you chatting about?
Just on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
No real reason, just like cool stuff, cool.
Sorry if I sound like an interrogator, but I'm really curious. I mean, he's a big star.
Yeah,
So who messaged who first?
we'd have to check.
Can we check that?
Right
Do you have your
now?
phones with you?
We can check later.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
It's too cold to do it now.
Let's check that later.
I did it yesterday.
And?
I can check, but I thought that it's kind of...
No need to show it.
Yeah, the format of this is a bit...
Don't show it. Just say who messaged first.
He did. He just wrote something like, let's work on something together.
Did he message the IC3PEAK account or your personal one?
I checked my personal one, but I think it's quite possible he messaged our band account
The band
too.
one too, yeah.
Because back then I replied that I wasn't working on anything at the moment. I was taking a break, and he said, yeah, same here. Let's think about something in the future. Then later I messaged him like, we have something to show you, a track. We sent it to him. He liked it, and that's how the song happened.
But from what I heard, back in 2020, he publicly mentioned either in his stories or in an interview that there's this band IC3PEAK.
Yeah.
And he'd love to collaborate with you. Not in the near future, but he wanted to do it someday. So he had already shown interest.
He definitely had.
Right.
But he's very open-minded in general. He supports a lot of different artists. He's not the kind of person who, after reaching a certain level of success, loses interest in others or stops paying attention to new artists or only focuses on his own work.
His career is actually really inspiring to me because both as a band and as a solo artist, he's an amazing collaborator. He's constantly evolving, changing, going through so many different eras, yet his listeners stay with him for years.
Uh-huh.
He even has some sort of a collab with Ed Sheeran. He's got a collab with us, with
He's very bold.
Baby Metal.
Oh,
So
with Baby Metal too?
yeah.
Oh.
And almost all of it, I really like a lot of what he's done in terms of this.
And you wanted to say it all feels organic.
I wanted to say that it's all just really good.
got it.
It's all great music.
So you got in touch, and what happened next?
Initially, we had actually already finished the track.
Yeah.
It was a complete song. I made a beat, Nastya recorded the vocals, we mixed everything, and then we thought, okay, cool, we need to add something to this part.
Like another artist.
Not just any artist, more like specifically Oli, because
really?
he was kind of meant for it.
Because we felt like he fit perfectly into
Yeah.
this track.
Yeah. So we messaged him, he liked it, and it all came together really well. He fits into it perfectly.
It's one of our best collab tracks, honestly. Everything just aligned so well.
Did he sing your lyrics?
No, he sang his own
He
lyrics.
wrote them himself?
Yeah, he listened to the whole track, read the lyrics, and then, of course, created his own part independently.
But he also sang along with the chorus.
Yeah, he did it a little, but just so you know, I'm the one growling there too, because everyone seems to think that I don't growl.
He screams, yeah.
Yeah.
And all of this was done remotely. You didn't have to meet up.
Yeah, we can just do it like that. I send him some stems, basically the track project, and he sends his back to me.
We're meeting here in Riga. Why here?
We came, or rather I came to shoot. We are filming a music video and live performance videos for the new album here, and Nastya lives here. She can elaborate on this.
Yeah, I'm staying here. I was born in Riga, but Grew up in Moscow, and it just so happened that after the war started, I ended up back in the place where I was born. But I don't live here all the time because we tour a lot and I travel a lot on my own. I usually spend about a month or two here on and off. It's kind of like a shelter.
What Russian language music has stood out to you lately? Or music made by Russian-speaking artists?
I recently listened to old Zemfira, some Agatha Christie, just a few songs.
That Nick mentioned Zemfira, I just remembered when I was around 12 or 13, I was a huge fan of hers, like a crazy fan. I don't think I've ever talked about this anywhere before.
So the first album?
Yeah.
Speed and so on.
Yeah, and I felt really lonely because for some reason no one in the class listened to her. My mom listened to her, so that's how I got into her music.
I guess it was mostly older people listening to her.
Yeah, probably.
Because it felt like back then everyone was listening to her.
Well, that's just how it happened for me. I had this funny story. I had a really poor childhood. And quite often, friends and relatives and even social services would give us clothes, so we had something to wear. My mom had this acquaintance who somehow worked with someone who either knew Zemfira or was friends with her. So Zemfira left her Harley Davidson boots, size 38.
For you?
Yeah, my mom took them for me. And they were almost 3 sizes too big, so I wore them with huge socks for many years. Eventually, my feet grew. I actually wear almost a size 40 now. But yeah, I wore them. I walked around in her boots.
And when they got a little tight, did you still wear them?
I don't really remember. In general, I hate wearing tight shoes, so probably not. But for me, that was a big deal because I was such a fan. That's the one and only time in my life I had a real super fan moment. I even used to draw portraits of her and stuff, so yeah, that was a phase.
I would have lost my mind if I had a pair of shoes, especially something this incredible from my favorite artist as a kid.
Yeah, I guess in some way maybe it gave me a bit of an energy boost too.
Literally through your feet.
Maybe, yeah.
Like this foot massage effect seeping in. That's one way to demonstrate a foot massage. That was weird, all right. Okay, well, you get it. So, have you ever met Zemfira?
Mm-mm.
Would you be interested in meeting her?
Well, yeah, but I think I'd feel awkward, scared, and deeply touched all at the same time.
What would be better? What would you prefer? Meeting her in person or keeping your memories of her as they are?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I've always really loved her music, but I never had that level of obsession where I tried to learn everything about her personal life or like stalk her or anything. I had this separate image of her in my mind as an artist. And though later, of course, when I got older, I watched interviews and stuff and I started to distinguish between the real person and, let's say, the artistic persona, or at least what I thought was the distinction. So I don't really have this overly romanticized image of her, and I understand that she's a real person with her own, quirks.
So, but after...
I don't think meeting her would shatter anything for me. Same with Renata Litvinova, just bringing her up for context, of course.
Well, they come together.
I know they're completely two different people, but I also loved her films, her persona. It was all really fascinating to me, inspiring in a way.
Do you know about the most incredible offer Renata Litvinova ever received? One that sounds straight out from an IC3PEAK song. In an interview with Ksenia Sobchak years ago, she talked about how, long before that, a fan had made her an unusual proposal. A fan later passed away, and in his will, he specified that Renata Litvinova must be present at my funeral, wearing some kind of veil, and when the coffin is lowered into the grave, she must be the first to throw away a handful of earth. And the fee for this was $10,000, either dollars or euros.
And she refused.
And she refused. She said, even though I'm quite detached and I can agree to the most unbelievable things, that time I declined and broke the deceased's last will.
For me, on the contrary, I kind of have a dream to perform at a funeral. I understand it's a really strange one, but...
Have you seen Noise MC perform at the funeral?
No.
Noise MC had a fan, a guy who had a tough life, and At some point, they connected, and when he passed away, Noise was invited to perform at his funeral. And it felt so natural, so fitting, and so uplifting, and so powerful that, honestly, all you could do was applaud. It was genuinely fascinating to watch. Do you want to do the same thing?
Well, I think it would be interesting. It's just that it's not really a tradition of our culture. But in other cultures, saying goodbye to someone doesn't always have to be a tragedy. It can be more of a celebration.
Or a rave like at Keith Flint's funeral?
A rave sounds cool too.
You have a collab with Grimes.
We do. We've loved and appreciated her work for a long time, and she spoke highly of us as well. It all happened the same way, just chatting on Instagram and deciding to do something together. It dragged on for a while, just theoretical discussions about the possibility of making something, and then we got a call, talked, and started experimenting. We went through a few attempts before finally landing on what we released.
What if it's my last day? And I will never see her face again!
I've always really loved Grimes. She had a huge influence on me in the early days of my production, and overall, I find her a very interesting person. For me, this collab was kind of a big deal back in the day. It all started when I watched some of her interviews a long time ago, back in the early days of YouTube. She was talking about her production process. She had such a unique style, and she did everything herself. That really inspired me because she was just using a laptop with Ableton open. It had just come out, I think, and I really loved her music. That's when I realized, okay, nothing is stopping me.
So she really inspired you?
Yeah. I mean, of course, I was already making music before that, but she was one of the people who helped me believe that I could do everything myself.
In 2020, Grimes posted this photo. If it weren't for the pregnancy, I would have thought that...
What's even funnier is that before she posted her pregnancy photo, I had uploaded a picture with fake belly, photoshopped as a joke, saying, "I haven't posted in a while, album coming soon." And then sometime later, her photo appeared. It was a total coincidence, but there really was a bit of a resemblance. Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, we do look alike. Nothing you can do about it. Sometimes people just resemble each other.
No, but at that moment just happened that she posted a similar image after you, right? Like she appeared in that look after you.
Yeah, but I don't think Grimes, this isn't one of those cases. She always had a thing with braids too, so we do look similar. When we started the project, people often compared me to her visually, which, to be honest, wasn't exactly enjoyable. It's not fun to be constantly compared to someone and labeled. I kept asking myself, okay, we're both women, both have braids, we both sing, we both have high-pitched voices, but we make completely different music. So in the end, it's still a very surface-level comparison.
So we're in Riga now. You lived here until you were 6, then moved to Moscow.
Yeah, I started first grade in Moscow. I grew up there, and the first time I returned to Riga, even briefly, was when I was 16. After that, I only came back for concerts.
Riga was the place you moved to when the war started.
Yeah, because I had the opportunity to get legal status here, and it just so happened that I had taken care of that even before the war, so when it started, this place became kind of my home again.
In our last episode, we filmed at a pet cemetery and talked a lot about death.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned that when you returned to Riga, you found an explanation for why you might have developed such an interest in death. Tell us about that.
One possible explanation for my interest in death, or maybe even a slight obsession with it, is that when I came back to my childhood home, the house where I grew up here, I realized something, and I had visited it a couple of times before, but for some reason I never paid much attention to the fact that it's located between two cemeteries.
What's the name of that neighborhood?
It's the Brasa district on Central Street. And from my backyard, you could literally go through a small gate straight into the cemetery, which of course we did. On the other hand, there is a large park called Liel Kopi, the Great Cemetery. And it's a park now, but it used to be a cemetery, and it's beautiful. And I spent a lot of time there walking around and even learned how to ride a bike there. Suddenly, all of this made sense to me. I realized that beyond all the esoteric ideas, the romanticization of death, or even the scientific side of it, there's a much simpler, more straightforward explanation for why I feel so comfortable visiting cemeteries in every city I go to, just to see how they are set up and walk around. It's because I literally spent time there as a kid. It was peaceful and it felt like a safe space for me, aside from the fact that cemeteries can be beautiful. It's interesting to see how burials are arranged, to observe the hierarchy, to see how people were buried, how they were remembered, and to think what it all means. But in the end, there's just this really simple and obvious explanation.
Childhood.
Yeah, childhood.
One of the biggest reflections on nostalgia in 2024 was Monetichka's album. The one with the line, "That was in Russia, that was long ago." Did you listen to it?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think about it?
I like the album. It was touching in a way, but I don't have that deep sense of nostalgia that I think the album is filled with. So on some level, I couldn't fully connect with it.
To resonate.
Yeah, because I can't say that I miss Russia. My last years, they were quite stressful. Honestly, after leaving, I felt relieved.
You mean because the FSB was harassing you?
Yeah, there was this constant nervous tension, a persistent sense of anxiety. I had trouble sleeping, and after I left, despite the fact that the war had started and there were other shocking events, I actually felt better psychologically. I even felt guilty about it. Like maybe I should have felt worse than I do, given the situation.
Some people might ask, I'm just repeating the question, not saying I agree, but what was happening in your life that made you feel the need to leave Russia just to breathe easier?
The thing is, it had been happening before all of this, and unfortunately, when you go through traumatic experiences, they carry over into everything else. Paranoia sets in and it doesn't go away. For me, at least, speaking for myself, I remember seeing parked cars on the street and thinking, are they watching me? At least for the first few months, I kept checking my phone, thinking maybe there was a spyware on it. I was afraid to say certain things over the phone just to have a normal conversation. I actually left Russia before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a year before that, I reckon. And the reason was that every time I traveled abroad, I felt relief. I felt calmer on a very deep level. Not everywhere, but at least in Berlin, where I live now.
Some people will hear this and say, so you just never loved Russia?
Well, more like...
It depends on what you mean by saying love. What do you mean by saying a country? And overall, it's...
Good riddance,
yeah.
they'll tell you.
But how is that even related? Just because we felt anxious? It's like being in an abusive relationship. Abuse can happen within a family or at the state level. And the state was clearly abusing us. And not just us specifically, we were just part of a larger group, artists, musicians, creatives, etc. But we still loved the place, we loved the people. We had friends, family, connections there. But in a certain way, we're victims of the situation and we're trying to change it. You can even love your abuser, even the state, in theory. because in some way it also fuels our creative potential. It gives us material, it gives us something to work with.
As you once said, the government is our co-author.
Of course. In a way, the Russian government is a huge artist too, just a really bad one. Yeah, but so that doesn't erase the fact that in our own way, we did love Russia. We loved the people, our audience, the nature, the culture, maybe not even every part of it, but still, I never had some fixed idea that I had to leave. But at some point, I realized that if I wanted to express myself freely, I'd have to leave, because I couldn't live in constant anxiety, always wondering what the consequences of my words or actions might be. Plus, I was surrounded by people who were constantly dealing with repercussions, whether for artistic activism or other actions. You're inside this bubble, and even in what seems like the safety of your own home, sometimes just a rustling noise can make you uneasy, or you're constantly worrying about your friends, your acquaintances, and so on. So even if it weren't for the war, leaving would have been necessary at some point.
As always, you have a really interesting tour schedule. From what I understand, you played 2 shows in Mexico City, and both times you pulled nearly 1,500 people.
What really struck me about South America was how different people are in terms of reception. When you picture fans or a passionate fan base, that's South America. You can't step outside, you can't walk anywhere without people rushing at you, following you by car, even climbing onto the car you're sitting in.
That happened to you?
Yeah, they scream, they squeal, they try to grab you, especially in Mexico. It's just an incredibly devoted audience that genuinely loves us. They express their emotions differently. They're louder, more intense, and for us, as more reserved people, it takes some getting used to. Because when people love something, they shout about it. They come up to you, they say it openly. It really feels like a full-on fan gathering. People wait for you, they scream, they rush towards you. When you leave a concert, they might follow you by car, waving posters or something. And perhaps for other artists, this is just normal. For bigger artists, rather. But I've never seen this level of response anywhere else. And during concerts, they screamed and sang so loudly that I couldn't hear myself at times because the microphone was picking up everything from the crowd. I couldn't hear myself. I couldn't hear the music. Sometimes I'd completely miss my cue to start a song or come in on the beat because I just couldn't hear it.
Really?
Yeah. It was actually a problem. We even had to change the microphone head so it wouldn't pick up as much sound from the entire venue. It just to make the performance technically possible.
While we're making our way through the Latvian forest, we remembered the Skataboina festival.
We started out playing at festivals like that, which were super DIY, organized by just a small group of people using their own money with no outside support. The first ones were without, run by our friends Victor and Kira. That was actually our second ever performance in front of a large crowd. We were just this tiny project at the very start of our journey. Our first solo concert was in St. Petersburg, where maybe 100, 110 people showed up, something like that. And then suddenly we're at the festival with no less than 600 people. That whole scene helped us a lot because it was a real community. We were friends with all the musicians, and we felt more like a big family.
It was really cool because we literally went from zero straight into playing raves with, at some points, up to 3,000 or 4,000 people.
Yeah, there were a lot of people, and it was a great way to toughen up because there weren't professionally organized festivals, and anything could happen there. Sound issues, technical problems, the cops showing up to shut it down because these events weren't officially approved. After going through all that, when you go on tour, you're ready to perform under any circumstances in the venue. Even the whole FSB monitoring tour later on was in some ways easier for us because we're already been through the kind of training. Yeah.
Let's address this. There are a lot of people running around here. From an outsider's perspective, it might look like they're searching for stashes, but no, it's actually an orienteering competition.
I hope he wins.
Well, it's...
He looks like a winner.
Yeah, that exhale really made it sound like you were rooting for him. Incredible. Your tour with Limp Bizkit was in 2020, right?
Probably.
Were they in good shape?
Absolutely. More than that, Fred Durst hasn't really changed. First of all, he's a really cool guy. We talked a lot. Second, he's exactly the same as he's always been. Like, he's still that simple.
Simple guy in the cap.
Yeah, you could say that. Just a simple guy in a cap. That's still him. I watched some of their old videos and he acts exactly the same on stage. It's not like he used to run around or destroy everything on stage. He's always just been chill, calm. Yeah. And that hasn't changed, which really, honestly, it really inspired me because they genuinely enjoy what they do. And the people in the crowd were also having a great time. The audience was, well, it was a specific kind of crowd, of course, but there were plenty of cool people too. And in the end, none of that really mattered because everyone was into it. It felt like one massive jam session happening in the stadium. That's when I realized, oh, this is what a long-lasting career looks like, because nothing about them had really changed. And on top of that, looking at what's happening with their music now, it's a full-on Limp Bizkit renaissance. People on TikTok rediscovered them, and now I think they're being listened to even more than back then. And I completely understand why that's happening. I mean, he really stood up for us because, honestly, during our opening set for Limp Bizkit, there were multiple times when the entire stadium told us to get lost, which, let's be real, was pretty expected. They'd never even heard of the kind of music we make. And on top of that, here comes some girl they've never seen screaming in a high-pitched voice before Limp Bizkit. Of course, they weren't gonna accept that. And that's understandable. As you get older, it becomes much harder to accept new things. People who listen to rock music in their 20s usually stick with it for life. That's just how it is, really. Therefore, fans grow older along with the bands they love.
It's interesting. I'm mentally scrolling through all the people I listened to rock with in my 20s, wondering if they only still listen to rock.
Well, not only, but it's a real thing. There are studies on this. I think after like 25 or 26.
Oh, you stopped listeing to new music, right?
Yeah. You stop getting into new
too.
genres, new music, and so on. I don't have that problem, but Fred Durst's fans definitely did. But he didn't. He was incredibly sweet. He actually defended us, speaking into the mic like, why are you giving them such a hard time?
From the stage.
Yeah.
Were you opening for them because he wanted you to, or because...
Yes.
So your main sources of income right now are touring and streaming.
And merch.
And merch. Does it bring in a lot?
Yeah.
What earns more, streaming or concerts?
Streaming.
Are most of the earnings from Apple Music and Spotify or somewhere else?
Mostly,
Yeah.
of course.
Was it the same before the war?
I think pretty much, yeah.
But the balance had already shifted in that direction.
Because most of your audience is international.
Yeah.
If you stopped touring and relied only on streaming, could you make a living?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we barely tour. But
we feel like we tour a lot.
But in reality, our tours are very short, like 30 cities a year. That's really not much.
My logic is better do fewer shows, but make them count. But I love being on stage. Nick does too. But touring itself is really tough. So if there's an opportunity to reduce the travel and the physical exhaustion that comes with it, of course, we'd rather do it less.
If concerts stopped completely and you stopped releasing new music, how long would your streaming numbers sustain you?
How many years would we last?
Yeah, how long could you keep living a normal life just of that?
Well, we haven't released an album in almost 3 years now, and it hasn't really affected our streaming numbers much. I'm trying to imagine, like, when I do a collab, I always try to imagine a bigger picture, how this track will sound in a few years, for instance. If it still sounds cool, If it still works, then it's great. If I imagine how it'll sound in a few years and it doesn't hold up, then no.
You both consume a lot of content and music. Looking at the state of music in early 2025, I mean, what's happening globally?
I think everything is turning into this third, fourth, even fifth wave of nostalgia. Very often it's nostalgia for music that has never actually existed. Sometimes it's nostalgia for a specific time period, sometimes it's nostalgia for a particular sound, and sometimes it's just recreating something that has never been there.
Can you give an example, maybe?
Well,
Nostalgia for something that never existed? Sorry, I'm eating.
Of course.
I hope you don't
yourself.
mind. I just haven't had these in years.
It's about imagination. Like, we never actually experienced certain eras that our parents lived through, but we hear about them. We can visualize them through their stories, through movies, through literature, and we construct our own version of that time.
Kind of like the myth of the Soviet Union and Russia.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Whole, that ice cream, those were the good old days.
Yeah,
thing.
you hear about that, then you see it reflected in movies all the time. And by the time it reaches you, it's an entirely different story because your imagination, just as Nick said, and your own perception get mixed in. But if we're talking about music and some sort of trends, personally, I see a big demand for more intimate, raw creativity, probably as a response to the rise of AI technology and everything surrounding it. There's this clearly growling value in things that are clearly made by a human, where you can actually hear that a human made it.
Like what?
Personally, I enjoy simple acoustic versions, like just a song with a guitar. That kind of thing resonates with me much more right now. Maybe it's just me, but I feel that way more than with electronic music, which can be created in so many ways.
Where a computer can do a lot of the work.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just a common cycle. Whenever a new technology advances rapidly and dominates everything, handmade creations and products become more valuable and rare. So people start paying more attention to them and seeking them out. It's like made by human is becoming kind of a trend.
literally handmade.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that human imperfections and little mistakes are becoming more and more valuable because technology is making everything so polished that it starts losing its humanity.
Is there any artist, male or female, whose vocals absolutely amaze you?
There are a lot of singers I really like, but my relationship with vocal admiration is complicated because my mom is an opera singer. She's been this maternal figure of vocal excellence for me since childhood, someone no one else can surpass. She's still the best in my eyes and maybe even the standard I'd want to strive for. And obviously, I don't do opera singing. That's a completely different field. But technically and professionally, I look at how she worked and continues to work, and I want to approach my own singing the same way.
Do you still keep in touch with your mom?
Yeah, we do.
Everything's good?
Yeah, we have a good relationship.
What about other relatives?
I stay in touch with all my relatives and have good relationships with them, even with my grandmother, who has completely opposite political views. We haven't lost contact at all. I don't know my father, so I don't have any connections on the side of the family. But with my mom, everything is good.
You've spent a lot of time in Los Angeles over the years. You've been there pretty often. Is it still an important place for music?
As a place, personally, for me, yes.
What really hit me is how predatory the label system is in the US. It's structured against the interest of the artist. The contracts are absolutely brutal, completely inhuman, and yet the labels make insane amounts of money. I spoke with a few people who were actually on the charts at the time, friends of ours, and they told me that they weren't making anything from their music, literally zero. What happens there is the revenue split is completely unbalanced. On top of that, the label invests in the artist, like marketing or promo and all of that. And then the artist is supposed to pay it back before they ever see any earnings. But the way it's structured, they never actually break even. Literally never. They can put anything they want into the contract, and in the end, the only way the artists, even massive ones, actually make money is through touring, pretty much.
And merch.
And merch, yeah.
There's also this setup where an artist can be completely new with no little prior to work, and they can already have a full back catalog. And a label might come in and say, we'll sign you on these terms, but we're also taking your back catalog, even though they had absolutely nothing to do with creating the music.
Nothing to do with what was written before.
Yeah. And everything that comes from the music's revenue, moving forward, the label takes a huge cut out of it. That's the kind of contract they offer. Well, they kind of offer certain benefits and great conditions in return, but in reality, it doesn't always work that way.
Honestly, a major label is just a bank, a really bad bank. Especially the major labels. They are basically giving out loans under terrible conditions, essentially. And very often they don't even have great teams. And from what I'm seeing, it's only getting worse. Every year the contracts are becoming even worse.
There are actually examples like trends like funk on TikTok. There was a period, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, when funk was everywhere, and viral TikTok videos were built around it, and tons of young artists started popping up.
With insane streaming numbers.
Yeah, these artists might only have 1 or 2 tracks, but they're already racking up millions of streams. Then some guy shows up, approaches this young, inexperienced artist who knows absolutely nothing about the industry and says, look, I'm offering you this amount of money, but I'll be buying the rights to your music. And the artist is thrilled, like, wow, something's happening.
What kind of money are we talking about? Like 50 or 100 grand?
Most likely less. But
maybe
for them,
even 100
it's huge
grand.
money because we are talking about some 15-year-old
So they
kid in
just hand
Novosibirsk.
over their
Right.
music, and the label, if it's a label, making money of it, but the artist doesn't seem a dime anymore. This is actually just due to inexperience mostly. And
So basically, just to make it clear, let's
They
say
just
they
offer
offer
him
the
money.
kid $30,000, which feels like a fortune to him.
yeah,
But then the streaming revenue from the track ends up making, say,
it made.
150 grand, meaning he could
It
have
works
earned
like
that,
this.
but he gave up the future earnings for an upfront 30K
Yep.
payout.
Yeah.
They're just projecting the artist's future growth. It's really basic math. They estimate how much money the artist could make, like in, let's say, 5 years, and then they offer them a deal for about 10 times less.
I've always been wary of the industry in general. For example, whenever we had discussions with labels, Nick and I would often be at odds. I was always the one saying, we don't need this. Nick wasn't necessarily saying, actually, no, we do need this, but he was at least open to considering some kind of collaboration. So when I first arrived in Los Angeles, I wasn't wearing any rose-colored glasses. I never expected some big industry guy to show up and say, whoa, you guys are amazing, let's work together, and it's been a magical fairy tale. In fact, I had the opposite mindset. I was expecting the worst, and I expect to find 0 real friends, no genuine people. I thought it would all be about money, just business, industry, corporate nonsense, but in reality it turned out to be way more interesting and complex with so many layers, and especially in creative circles among musicians and artists, there are really fascinating people. Ones who aren't in it for fame or clout, but who are genuinely passionate about what they create, the creative process, and so on. And the same goes for filmmaking. There are a lot of true enthusiasts.
It's not like I was always pushing for labels. I was just curious about how the system works from the inside out. I thought maybe we could try releasing one album through a label just to see what happens, because when you look at it, almost every major artist is signed to a label. We are actually pretty rare in that sense. We have no label at all. We only work with a distributor, and that's it.
Let's break it down quickly. What's the difference between the two?
Well, a distributor, basically, you can't just upload your music directly to Spotify yourself. You need someone to handle that process for you.
Basically, it's like your mobile service provider.
Yeah,
Basically
kind of.
a middleman between you and the audience.
So the distributor helps you upload the music to all the platforms, and a label technically handles distribution, but it also helps with visuals, promotion, and songwriting. And
Well, it depends on the deal.
right, it varies. So it's more like a producer in both the classic and broader sense of the word.
Well,
Kind of a creative studio.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Sort of like Gas Golder or Black Star.
Plus, a label usually has its own direction and vision for
Yeah.
the kind of artist it signs and the kind of world it wants to build around them that can play a huge role too.
And when I talk about labels, I mostly mean the major ones. There are also small indie labels that do things in a much cooler, more interesting way, but for now, we'd rather stay
I
independent.
think we just need our own label if we ever decide to do that.
That's basically the same thing.
Who is Kim Dracula?
He is a musician, an artist from Australia. Right now, as far as I know, he's living in Los Angeles. He first got noticed on TikTok. He used to do metal covers of popular songs. Then he started releasing his own music since he had already been involved in other projects before. Honestly, I randomly found him on Instagram. I thought his vocal technique is really interesting and unusual, so I started following him, and at that time he was just starting out, releasing different snippets and building momentum really fast, and I thought it would be cool to collaborate with him, so we made a track together.
Did you like it?
The track?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this track.
Did you collaborate with him because his music was interesting, or was it also a way to tap into the TikTok audience?
No, I didn't think about that at all at the time. I generally just liked everything, his style back then, his technical skill, the way he shot his videos, and his whole artistic approach to TikToks, the irony of it. I just wanted to collaborate because he is a great singer, and I really like how it turned out. I'm really happy with the outcome. I'd even do another one with him at some point.
So do you ever feel like Los Angeles, while maybe not exactly the La La Land era, is kind of, well, pretty much outdated as a center of the entertainment industry? Like, in the internet age, you can pretty much create incredible music in your garage. I mean...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Because now there are way more creative hubs, and LA isn't the only one anymore.
Yeah, but personally, I like LA because in a way it feels kind of timeless. At the same time, though it is a bit stuck in the past, literally. And yet, so many people from all over the world still flock there, something just passing through, but it's one of those places where you could randomly meet anyone. And it has this dark side to it, despite all the sunshine and bright colors. That contrast is what makes it so interesting.
What do you mean by dark?
Well, by dark, I mean that in the sense that people are chasing something, whether it's the American dream, fame, or whatever. LA is the capital of capitalism. At the same time, everyone's constantly grinding, trying to survive. Housing is insanely expensive. Jobs are hard to get. And despite the perfect weather, there's still so much depression. Everything around you glows and shines with money, but most people can't actually afford that lifestyle. Not even close. And at the same time, you have massive issues, substance abuse, poverty, entire districts filled with people living in tents, crime, and whatnot. So it's a place where people can literally lose their minds in a very short period of time. But for me, it's attractive. There's so much history there, and it fuels something inside me. Even fear fuels you because you don't want to be one of those people who lose everything and end up living in a tent. That fear pushes you to keep moving, to do something, to find your people, which is really hard there. Your survival literally depends on how well you communicate. and who you surround yourself with. I'm naturally a very introverted person, so for me, it's a huge challenge. Arriving somewhere, trying to make new connections, learning to communicate with people, especially in a different language, but it's fascinating. I feel like LA is a place of personal growth for me.
But despite all that, you did move to LA. I mean, full relocation.
No, there was a moment when I seriously considered it after I had already moved to Berlin. But eventually I realized that it wasn't for me. Physically, I feel great there. The weather is always amazing. The nature is incredible. And there are lots of cool people. But every time I came back and looked at what I had created there, be that musically or visually, I didn't like that. And I have a lot of theories about why it is.
Like what?
I used to think that I wasn't really influenced by my environment. I thought I am who I am, no matter where I am, Russia or wherever, because I just sit at home, make music. How could my surrounding possibly affect me? I thought they basically couldn't, but it turns out that it's not true. And for example, in LA, LA affects me in the sense that I end up talking a lot with people from the industry, not just the musicians, but managers or agents and all sorts. They are all great people, but after a while you start thinking like them. And when you start thinking like them, you sort of start making like safer... how do I put it?
Choices.
Safer choices.
And you lose your individuality.
You end up making things that have already been done. I wouldn't say that happened to me completely like 100%.
But it had an influence.
A big one, yeah. So even though I physically feel better in LA, my creative output there turns out less interesting. I only began realizing that later after listening back to what I had made.
No.
That's interesting indeed. For me, it's the complete opposite.
The opposite?
Yeah.
Tell us.
Actually, two of our best tracks, one of which was released before the album and the other will be on the album. So they were recorded in Los Angeles, at least for me. I recorded them there.
Which one was before the album?
Nenaviju.
Was recorded in LA.
Partially, yeah. And Gospodi was also finished in Los Angeles.
But I wrote the music for it long before that, somewhere completely different.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't write the full lyrics there. But
Well, you see,
yeah, only a part of it. But the full part, put together, finish the vocals and figure out how it should all come out together, both vocally and structurally, only there. And that didn't get in my way at all. I feel like I'm always going against the mainstream. I often push back against my environment instead of adapting to it. And for me, that's what makes things interesting. It's like artistic resistance, almost like a kind of an artistic research. Maybe that's what happens for me in LA, and instead of blending in and conforming to a place, I do the opposite.
well, I'm not saying I conform to a place.
I was talking about myself just now.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're saying I conform.
It happens unconsciously.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Pushing against something still means it's influencing you in a big way.
Of course, I'm not denying the influence. I'm just saying it affects me differently. And plus, for me, at least in this short term in the US, actually has a therapeutic effect because the culture there is different, especially in California, in LA, is built around supporting you. People's default mindset is to say something positive. No matter what you do, even if it's not great, they'll still say, whoa, that is just so amazing and cool.
Yeah, but that's more of a Californian thing.
Yeah,
it's not always
and-
like this. You go to New York and they'll just tell you piss off.
And for me, that's really uplifting. It's encouraging me. And instead of retreating into myself, I actually open up more. And funnily enough, my reserved, somewhat cold demeanor seems appealing to people there. Their culture traits are a kind of release for me because expressing things so openly and warmly doesn't always come naturally to me. And in return, my reserved nature is a kind of release for them, since in their culture, being distant or bluntly saying you don't like something isn't really common. So in the end, this exchange feels like
Synergistic.
Yeah, exactly. At least for now, that's how I feel about it. Maybe I just haven't spent enough time there yet, but that's my experience so far.
Dead but pretty. Explain the moment in the music video for me. So when the cops grab you, it looks like they're hauling you off. Like, okay, that's it, you're getting arrested. But then they take you to Red Square for a raid. What does that mean? Are the cops with us? Are they on our side?
Well, it'd be nice to think so. That's the fantasy, right? Like the cop arrests you, throws you in the car, then suddenly winks at you. Don't worry, I got you. But actually, it's a bit rooted in reality. For example, when we were photographing our merch on Red Square, and the second we stepped onto it in full getup with our bleached out faces, cops immediately approached us, started profiling us, running our names through their system, checking who we are, what we were doing, and we're just taking pictures. We're minding our own business, and we weren't planning any kind of protest or anything like that. But then right there, while the officers are running our info, there was another one standing nearby. I don't remember exactly, probably not riot police, but maybe a regular cop. And he came up to us and said, "Guys, I know who you are. You're awesome. It's just, we're doing our job." Classic line, of course. I'm the good one, they're the bad ones. But I do think all kinds of people end up in the system, and the system processes them in different ways. And at one point, I had this whole idea of the good cop, like some tiny sliver of hope that somewhere there's a police officer who actually sticks to moral compass, that it doesn't waver, and he somehow resists the system even as just one person, which of course is impossible in reality. So, I mean, the music video it's kind of a fiction, but it's also about co-authorship, that the government is our co-author too.
They're IC3PEAK too.
Well, in some sense, yeah, sometimes. And about trauma, like the cops keep showing up video after video because we do have a backstory with them.
From the real life.
Yeah, because no matter how funny or whatever it might seem from the outside, for us, it was a whole chapter in our lives, and a chapter where at some point it became scarier just to walk outside the door. And that's true for a lot of people. I have friends who only after leaving Russia, only after enough time had passed, they finally stopped feeling fear. And I was lucky in that I somehow didn't carry that fear with me, but there was a long period where I was super paranoid. I'd go out in 3 hoodies, always checking over my shoulder, because I had situations where FSB agents were literally tailing me. And it's not a nice feeling. It's this heavy, suffocating sensation. You literally become paranoid. You start questioning yourself. Am I imagining this, or is this happening to me? And that's the worst part of it all.
You don't want me happy. You want me when I'm sad.
Was the movie Midsummer an inspiration for your Kiss of Death video?
I'm a huge Ari Aster fan. I've watched all of his movies multiple times, even his student films. I saw Bo is Afraid 3 times in theaters, even though I know that for a lot of people it's the most boring movie in the world. And of course I watched Midsummer as soon as it came out. So I think indirectly, at least it probably did influence me, and I think Nick and I even watched it together. But the thing is, besides the movie itself, this whole ritual thing, how should I put it?
Pagan rituals?
Yeah. Pagan rituals, they existed in Russia, and here in Latvia as well, there is still practice. And I think that probably had a much bigger impact on me, because when I was writing the kiss of death concept and figuring out our visuals, that's what I was actually drawing from. I think visually Midsummer is quite a different story compared to our music. The connection here is more about these pagan imagery elements.
Who else do you love in cinema?
I watch a lot of movies in general. Like, cinema has probably influenced me more than music ever has because I'm just so visual as a person. I like Ty West. The whole hyped up X trilogy with Mia Goth. I also love Julia Ducournau, the French director. I love David Lynch, of course, obviously, Lars von Trier. I mean, I love Scandinavian cinema in general. Bergman, too. Huge figure for me. Italian cinema as well.
What specifically?
I love Dario Argento. I'm a huge horror fan. And actually, when I was working on the visuals for our live performances that we've been doing recently, I got hit with a wave of nostalgia for this one movie that traumatized me as a kid. Speaking of Scandinavian cinema, it's Lila Forever. Like, the kids have this wings in the movie, and we do too.
Yeah, I saw the wings at the cabin.
Yeah.
Are you going to use them in the live shows?
Yeah, we are. But that's not the only reason. It's just such a powerful image that it's randomly surfaced inside me, even though I hadn't seen that movie in forever. So after I already designed the visuals, I decided to rewatch it and I broke down crying. It's just so heavy and I was racked for like a week. But yeah, cinema influences me a lot. Like, I've seen everything by Lars von Trier, and there's one film I still haven't watched, and I keep postponing it because part of me is afraid, like, what if he stops making films? So I think...
Saving it for last.
Yeah, in that case, I'll have one last film to watch. But the one that
Which one?
really... Antichrist. I don't know if that's the best choice for a final film, but...
How did you shoot the scene where you're playing the drums midair?
They hoisted me up. I was hanging way up in the air. There was a crane. I was strapped to a wire, which they removed in CGI later. And down below there were, 6, 7 people holding these massive birch poles with drums attached to them. Meanwhile, they were blasting this crazy wind at me, like full-force industrial wind machines, the kind they used for hang gliders. It was freezing, like literally near 0 degrees. We shot in the autumn, I think.
You were shirtless.
Yeah, and that was like 4 a.m. to back-to-back 20-hour shoot days. So, yeah, good times. A lot of fun.
So your album is coming out. How did Господи прости came to be?
Well, for me, it started as a note on my phone with just a verse. And then it grew into something bigger textually. And it's definitely a conversation. I mean, you could call it a dialogue with God, but more like with someone humanized, maybe even some narcissistic parental figure. I don't know how exactly to define it. And in this conversation, the lyrical hero, the protagonist, is basically saying, I'm doing everything I possibly can so that God will finally notice me, finally give me love, attention, and justice in such a good way. But it never happens. No matter how hard they try, it just doesn't happen.
Oh, so it's like a dialogue with an abstract parent. Because to me, it felt more like disillusionment with humanity.
Well, I mean, the figure of God is always somewhat parental. You feel at home with God in the church, or when communicating with God, it can replace a family. I I don't know, I put it like that. Whatever they are, it's something different for everyone. And I'm not saying that as something literal, like I'm talking to my actual parent. No, it's something that's much bigger. Maybe even humanity as a whole. Why not?
So what or who is Loser about?
I'm such a loser, and I'm losing.
Well, it's kind of... Honestly, half the album is breakup songs. Because, well, this is my personal story. I had this big love before the war started. And, like, I tried to hold on to it through all my travels back then, but it didn't survive. Time, distance, it just didn't hold up. So a part of the album is about breaking up with someone you loved very deeply and everything that comes with it, the attempts to hold on to it, the guilt, wondering if you did something wrong or you didn't do anything wrong. And Loser, it's literally about losing someone who was both a person and a home, someone who filled those voids inside of you. But when you lose them and you lose your home and no longer have that physical place that feels like home, and in that feeling you just stay there imagining how things could have been different, and still there's this fantasy that keeps you warm because this wasn't a breakup where you hate the person you lost. It's almost like light in a way because love is still there. And in this song, I reflect on how somewhere deep inside me, I still have this warmth that holds me together. And that feeling of home, maybe it's just a memory now, but it still gives me strength. And of course, you feel like a loser. And at one point, I even considered changing the chorus, like addressing to someone instead of saying, I'm such a loser. I want to say, you're such a loser, because breakups always put you in these weird, ambivalent states. And then I just left it in the end as it is in the song.
Is this person from Russia?
Yeah, originally, yes.
Uh-huh.
But now not anymore, of course. He also left Russia at the start of the war.
Is this person a guy?
This person is a guy.
So what do you
This
think?
person is a man.
Well, yeah. Were you together for a long time?
Well, we met almost a year before it started, almost like 8 months before the war began, and we weren't in a relationship for long before the war.
And why did the war affect it?
Because, well, indirectly it did. I'm not saying it was only because of the war, but I just had the opportunity to be in different places around the world, in Europe and so on, and he at the start of the war didn't have that possibility. He could only stay in certain areas. And that was also part of the reason for my constant moving around. So,
Without European documents.
yeah.
And the relationship couldn't survive the separation.
No, they lasted for a long time, but long-distance relationships are really tough. This was my first experience with something like this, and, well, maybe I couldn't handle it at some point because, I mean, no matter how hard you try, if two people in a long-distance relationship don't finally come together in one place, it becomes unbearably painful, and constantly going through these ups and downs and meeting and partying and meeting and partying if you wear you down a lot.
I can't imagine that. And was there no way to get European documents?
Getting European documents? Well, he couldn't get European documents. He had other documents that allow him to stay in Europe from time to time, but only for short periods.
Does he know there will be a song about him? Or will he find out after the interview or from the album?
Well, he's heard the whole album, technically, if he suspects that there's some song about him on the album.
Oh, so you still keep in touch?
Yeah, we do.
Uh-huh. So you stayed friends, just not as a couple.
Well, I don't know if we're exactly friends, but we stay in touch. We talk. We're not completely, how do I put it? We didn't drift apart like ships in the night.
Is he involved in creative work?
Yes.
Is he famous?
Well, these are tough questions, just official ones.
I'm curious.
Feels like
I'm really curious.
feels like I just visited my grandma.
Stay tuned, everyone. Andrei Malachov is with you.
I already regret saying this because it's
Well, I'm
going
sorry.
way too far.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't even know. I mean, I didn't ask for his permission to talk about him.
Well, we're not naming him. Last one. Is he a musician?
Music is one of the things he does.
Okay, I won't pry anymore. You've launched your own project. Tell me about it.
For about a year and a half, I was just writing music for myself. And it just so happened that after Nastya left, she was really busy with other things. For me, music, as I've recently realized, is like a therapy. I just really need to write music. I write every day, no exceptions, for several hours. That's the only time I feel whole and good. Otherwise, because I'm a storyteller, and when I stop telling stories through music, I start telling stories to myself about health, about things that aren't even happening,
You start overthinking.
Well, for example, I start getting hypochondria, overthinking my health too much. But when I write music, that doesn't happen because all that energy gets channeled into it. And since Nastya wasn't working with me as actively at that time, I ended up with a huge amount of music that I needed to put somewhere. So at first, I started working with other people, producing a few tracks, but then I realized that I just need to try singing myself. And at some point, it could actually turn into something decent in terms of voice and vocals. Originally, I used to sing a lot. Initially, my first project was actually with vocals. Before I met Nastya, I was already singing, but after I heard Nastya sing, I stopped because from the very first notes, she was way better than me. And then this opportunity came up. I started writing a lot, composing a lot, singing a lot, completely obsessively, every single day for hours. And now I actually have a lot of unreleased music. I've put out 2 tracks, but I have about an album and a half worth of songs that I'll be releasing later after the IC3PEAK album, because right now I need to focus on that.
How would you define your genre?
Well, it's more like rock.
You changed your look. You're bald now. Why did you decide to do it?
Easier. Just easier.
How did you feel when you first did it? Or was it not the first time?
I never really liked my hair to begin with. They were always very thin, and thin blonde hair, well, I just didn't really like how it looked. And then someone suggested, just try shaving it, why not? So I gave it a shot, just shaved off a little at first, then smoothed my hair down a bit, looked in the mirror, I thought, okay, not bad. And it turned out I'm one of those people whose head shape actually allows them to pull it off.
No, it looks really good.
Thanks.
Is there an artist you dream of collaborating with?
I really like Mitski. I really like Lana Del Rey. I like Chappelle Roan. Yeah, it would be amazing to do something together someday.
In these almost 3 years since the war started, have you ever regretted speaking out and having to leave?
No, I've never felt that way, not even for a moment. I would like to have the ability to visit Russia, probably, but a different Russia, not the one that exists now. And I haven't felt any any kind of heaviness over not being able to go back. It hasn't weighed on me that I can't return to Russia right now because I understand that there's nothing for me to do there. And I don't really, I have a few acquaintances and relatives whom I'd always be happy to see, but there are other ways to meet up. You don't have to go somewhere else. Apparently, you're not exactly welcome at. And overall, I feel like everything in my life is one way or another unfolding the way it's meant to. The growth, some kind of progress. Maybe I got lucky, or maybe it's the result of my own efforts, but my life has changed significantly since I left Russia. It hasn't gotten worse, though. It's just different. I'm reinventing myself in new ways, but the core of who I am remains unbroken. This hasn't destroyed me, it hasn't crushed me, and it hasn't thrown me into endless depression, and I'm not dead because of the circumstances from the inside. I just know that for some people it did, and it's sad that it happened that way, and I hope they'll be able to rebuild their lives the way they want.
And finally, what is power?
It's in humaneness.
And finally, what is power?
Well, I believe still that it's empathy, which means it's love. Empathy and love. Simple as that.